Good afternoon, good evening. You've probably heard us wish you every good as a part of this session, so good whatever time it is for you. Welcome to General Admission, a guide to making your forms accessible, our accessibility focused session for this user conference. I'm really excited for the content that you're going to see today. I'm joined by my colleague, Oscar Goya, our product manager. Oscar, hello. And Oscar is going to be walking through today's presentation. Before we get started, we did want to collect a little information from you. Obviously, accessibility is important enough for you to spend some time with us today learning about it. But from your organization's perspective, how important is accessibility to your organization? You can, if you haven't filled out a poll during our user conference this year, all you need to do is click on the answer that best fits your current situation. And this will just give us an idea of, from your perspective, what your organization's perspective on accessibility is. Give you a couple seconds to get your answers in, then we'll pull the rug out from under you and we'll take a look at the breakdown. This is one of my favorite parts about our user conference, is getting a feel for how our customers feel about certain topics. All right, we're about the 50% mark, so I'm going to go ahead and close our poll. All right, this shouldn't be a surprise. I think, many of you, if you're spending time with us today, you probably think that accessibility is very important, and I'm hopeful that your organization agrees. I do see a couple of you answering, unsure or thinking it's not important, and I can understand those perspectives as well. Oscar has some very interesting, we'll say, statistics later in this session that we'll talk about the importance of accessibility across multiple websites. And spoiler alert, they're not that great. Oscar, though, enough from me. I'm going to hand things over to you for the rest of the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. Hello, everyone. Good whatever, again, as Josh said. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Oscar, a product manager who's passionate about digital equity, and today we're exploring accessibility through the lens of web forms. This session is about broadening our understanding, not just of what accessibility is, but why it matters deeply across sectors and organizations. Whether you're a designer, a developer, or a strategist, this session is for you. So for our agenda today, we'll start with the why, the ethical and practical reasons accessibility should be a part of every digital conversation. Then we'll get into what actually makes a form inaccessible, followed by an overview of global standards, including WCAG. I'll share a live demo to bring these ideas to life, and then we'll look at a case study to show real-world impact. We'll finish with takeaways and a time for your questions at the end. So let's move into why accessibility matters. Accessibility is not a niche concern, it's really foundational. The WHO estimates over 1 billion people worldwide live with a disability that affects how they interact with the internet. And yet nearly every major website, 97.4% of them, of the top 1 million, still contain accessibility errors of some type. That's not just a technical gap, it's a human one. If our forms are hard to use or impossible to navigate, we're creating barriers, often for the people who need our services the most. So let's talk about what specifically can make a form inaccessible. Let's break this down. The barriers here are often simple, but they compound quickly. No labels on input fields mean screen reader users can't understand what's being asked. Low color contrast excludes people with vision differences. Keyboard traps where users can't tab out of a field are an instant wall. And unclear or unannounced error messages leave users confused and unsupported. These might seem like small oversights, but for someone relying on assistive technology, they're the difference between access and exclusion. So, what can we do about that? Luckily, there are key principles established by certain guidelines that help us to meet success criteria to attain accessibility. So accessibility is grounded in really 4 key principles, collectively known as POUR, and this is from the WCAG. So first off, we have perceivable. This means users must be able to receive information, whether visually, audibly, or through tactile interfaces. Operable. Every function should be accessible via keyboard with no time constraints that lock people out. Understandable. Content and interaction should be predictable and clear. And robust. The code should function reliably across browsers and different assistive technologies. These principles come from the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, developed by the W3C. WCAG is a globally recognized framework used by governments, organizations, and industries alike. In the United States, we have Section 508, which mandates accessibility for federal websites and federally funded contractors. The European Union enforces the EN 301/549, applying to public sector sites across the EEA. Other countries have adopted or adapted WCAG into national policy as well. So when we talk about accessible forms, we're talking about global evolving expectations. Most importantly, we're talking about people. Standards give us structure, but the real goal is making sure everyone can engage with the tools and services that we offer. Now, recently, the W3C released updated guidelines known as the WCAG 2.2. And WCAG isn't static. Version 2.2 is the new iteration and reflects the realities of how people use the web today, especially on mobile devices and with cognitive accessibility needs. Some of the key changes: larger clickable areas, more visible focus indicators, and more nuanced guidance around navigation. These updates may seem incremental, but they reflect a growing awareness. Accessibility is a moving target, and staying current means staying human-centered. There is no enforcement date yet for WCAG 2.2, but organizations that wish to hit that level of compliance can do so using tools like FormAssembly and other accessibility tools alike. I'm going to talk a little bit about how FormAssembly can help you attain compliance with accessibility guidelines. So while accessibility principles are platform agnostic, tools can make it easier to apply them. FormAssembly supports built-in features like ARIA attributes, accessible error handling, and keyboard-friendly designs, all configurable without code. But the larger message here is, tools don't make your forms accessible. Your design decisions do. Whether using FormAssembly or another solution, accessibility is a mindset, not just a plugin. So with that being said, I'd love to show you in a demo some of the accessibility features that FormAssembly offers and other tools like would offer as well. So I'll transition over to my screen share. Just give me a second to set that up. Alrighty, so here I am in FormAssembly, and I'm going to walk through creating a form from scratch and featuring some of the accessibility features that we have available to our form builders. So let's start off with creating a brand new form. Start with a blank form this time around. And for instance, this will be my swag order form. And on this form, I'm going to add a few of my fields. And I'm going to take advantage of something that FormAssembly offers, which is predefined content. In this case, what I've done is I've created these fields before, and I've stored them in my predefined content to make it easier for me to add these fields quickly and repeatably. Notably, what comes over when I do that is the ability to save the configurations of each of these fields, including the ability to save their autocomplete attributes and their formats in an accessible way. So in this case, I have a first name field that's a text input field. And what I've done is I've already added the autocomplete attribute of given name, which is an HTML markup attribute that you can add to all of your fields using FormAssembly. This makes it easier not just for browsers to autofill, but it also makes it more accessible for assistive technologies like screen readers to be able to understand the content of a web form. Another area that I can use this is via email address, and I can also apply validation rules as well. Using FormAssembly, I can set an expected input format that helps to guide users to enter valid information when they're responding to this form. So in this case, I both set the email as the expected input format, and I've set the matching autocomplete attribute as well of email. Another thing that I can do using FormAssembly is, of course, make a field required. And so one of the principles that we talked about when it comes to error handling is clear error messages. And so by marking a field required, I know that this is a required field, and if it's missed, there will be an accessible error message that's presented to the respondent upon submission. I'm going to add another section now. So Again, I have more saved content here. I'll add address information. Similarly, this has already been marked up and saved. This is super easy for me to add and repeat this across multiple forms if I need to. And then lastly, I'll add my last section, which are my swag options. Likewise, all of these fields, like I said, come marked up from form assembly with accessibility in mind, so you don't have to tweak anything else when it comes to these types of fields. Now, something that's also beneficial as I'm building out a form, and as we just mentioned with WCAG 2.2 guidelines, there's more of a focus on mobile accessibility and generally just accessing content and forms on mobile. So with form assembly, what I can actually do in the builder is I can actually preview my form as it would appear on a mobile device. So really quickly, I can get an idea of what the field layout will look like, and if this is going to fit on a mobile device, a much smaller screen. Next, I want to talk about color contrast and themes. A big part of accessibility guidelines is the ability to set color contrast so it's accessible to those with visual disabilities. One of the ways I can manage that is using the themes option here within Form Assembly. You can see here I have a current theme, and I'll mention that all of Form Assembly's public themes are rated for WCAG 2.1 AA accessibility today, so you can easily jump in and use any one of these default themes, and you'll know that those themes are accessible. But if I wanted to customize one of these themes, I have full access to control the values in there. So for instance, let's say that the section headers, like contact information here, are a little too small for my liking. What I can do really easily is come into the theme editor, and I can just tweak that just a little bit to make that a little bit larger. That makes it much easier for me to understand what's going on here, and makes it easier for my respondents to understand what's in that section. Now, as you saw as part of building this form, none of these fields, I didn't have to configure code for any of these fields, and that's really nice. But when I look at a form, say this form here, what I can do is I can use existing tools within my browser to quickly check the validity of its accessibility rating. I can use tools like Axe DevTools or even Chrome's built-in Lighthouse feature to take a look at the accessibility rating of this field, of this form. So for instance, I can use Lighthouse here, which is built into Chrome, and I can evaluate this form based on accessibility. So that's a great point of view and a quick report on what this is. I'm not going to say that this is a comprehensive view, but it's definitely pointing me in the right direction. It gives me a good insight really quickly at a glance if this is going to be an accessible form. Likewise, we can use Axe DevTools, another well-known plugin for accessibility, to help quickly evaluate my form. So I can start a full page scan here. That'll run. This report is running against WCAG 2.1 AA. I can see that there are 0 issues found initially with this review. There are many other tools and services that exist out in the market. There are tools like SiteImprove. There are communities like Accessiby that are all available to help you build more accessible content online. And the last thing I'll note is, as we mentioned, accessibility isn't just for those that need it, but it can be beneficial to everyone else as well. Something I'll mention is if you like to use other visual plugins, say what's something really common is dark mode on a lot of pages, automatically converting pages so they're not blindingly bright when you're using them, can also be benefited by designing content accessibly as well. So a plugin like Dark Reader here can be used to invert the colors and apply dark mode here. This is really possible because the markup on the page is accessible and semantically formatted, meaning that plugins like Dark Reader can easily convert the colors for you in a way that's still visible and accessible. And if we were to run these accessibility tools, again, in a dark mode format, we would see similar results with the accessibility because of that markup, allowing it to be converted seamlessly to and maintain its compliance. So I think with that being said, what I want to do is I'm going to close out this demo, and I'm going to hand it back to Josh to tell us a little bit more about a real-world use case and success story when it comes to accessibility.
Yeah, Oscar, thank you for that demo. I love seeing our accessibility tools in action. I really appreciate getting a walkthrough, and I can't be the only one on this call who didn't know that Chrome had those built-in features for testing accessibility. Very cool. Thank you for sharing. I did want to just spend a little bit of time and talk about a customer story. Some friends of ours in Pennsylvania, Central Pennsylvania Food Bank, came to Form Assembly not for accessibility to begin with. They were looking for a way to streamline their internal processes. Their IT team suggested moving to Salesforce. And with Salesforce, they needed a tool that would allow them to get data into Salesforce, which is a use case that I'm sure many on this call and most of our customers actually use Form Assembly for. What they found, though, was with Form Assembly forms, they got more than just a streamlined way of getting data into Salesforce. What they found was they were able to make their forms, which were previously available in a different form tool. And I'm not here to lambast any other tools, but they were struggling with providing accessible experiences to the audiences they serve. They serve over 27 counties in central Pennsylvania with food services. And a lot of the audiences that they serve, a lot of the people that need their services, didn't have access to things like a desktop computer or something where they were able to access, a full-fledged form. They needed something that provided responsive experiences that could be, placed in the hand of the audiences that needed their services. And they found with Form Assembly's forms, they were able to provide both, forms that presented well on computers as well as mobile devices. And what they saw was an increase not only in the amount of applications that they were able to bring in, but also in their approval rate or approval percentage, forgive me. And so they were actually able to serve more people with their food bank services, which, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not just accessibility on a device, it's also accessibility of services that people need. I think it's a great story. Of course, they also, did see some streamlining of processes. We love our efficiency here. We were able to save them some manual data entry, but at the end of the day, we were also able to connect them a little bit closer with the audiences they served. I love this story. Audience, you've probably heard every speaker talk about this, but we do have a resources section. If you'd like to read more about Central Penn's story and our friend Laura, who works there, you can access that from the Resources Center as well. Oscar, I'm going to hand things back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Josh. So as a quick takeaway from this whole presentation, what I want to mention are a few things. Accessibility protects your organization from legal risk, yes, but it also expands your reach. It increases your form completion rates and it builds brand trust when you're able to design your forms in such a way that are accessible. When people encounter a form that just works, they feel seen. They feel considered. That's not just good UX, it's good business. It's also a statement about your values, that no one should be excluded from participating in your services because of how they interact with the world. So with that being said, I think now is a great opportunity for us to turn it over to answer a few questions. Josh, I'm going to ask you to help me out with some of these as well. But I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. Accessibility is a huge field and no one knows everything. But by asking questions and working towards shared understanding, I think we get closer to the systems and include everyone. So Josh, do you have any questions from the chat that you can share? I don't know if I'm quite hearing you, Josh, unfortunately.
Because I was muted, even in 2025, I have not figured out how to use every tool. Forgive me. I have a, I have a question from Arlisha. They ask, does Form Assembly plan to introduce a native way to organize heading hierarchy within forms? They have seen that sometimes heading level looks like level 3, which can cause some confusion around using a screen reader.
Yeah, that is a bit of a design choice as well. So and I would say you do have some control when it comes to that. You can manually modify the HTML of certain fields, like the form header, if you need to. You can go a little bit deeper if you want to customize that. I know I said that there's very low code, no code when it comes to form assembly, but that doesn't mean we cap you at that. There is the freedom to get into custom coding, to apply different styles as you see fit. We've made a specific choice to start with an H3 because we saw that it made the most sense when it came to publishing forms and embedding them on other websites. We were respecting the hierarchy of the parent pages, which is something that you should also consider when you're publishing form assembly forms and where you're publishing them, is that it makes semantic sense with the rest of the parent page's HTML as well. So that's something to be aware of, but it's also great feedback for us. If this is something you'd like to see us change, I highly recommend that you reach out to our team and let us know, submit some user feedback and let us know what your thoughts are, and we'd love to consider it.
Fantastic. Arlisha notes that they have been using HTML to handle this. Arlisha, I hope that you also can pass along some feedback to the team. And they thank you, Oscar, for explaining why the decision was made. I appreciate that as well. Our next question today, and we got this a couple times, is languages for forms. Making forms available in different languages. Do you have any guidance on how to best handle that?
So right now we do offer a language translation library. So there are a set of languages available from the form properties menu where you can select what languages you want a form to be in. Now, what we've chosen to do with our forms is you set a specific language for each form. And we do that because we believe that you may have specific language and context that is only available in that specific language in the way that you format your labels or questions. And so what we support is the ability to create multiple copies of that form, but you can tweak each form for its specific language to make sure it suits your respondents best. I know that we have had feedback from users asking, is there a way that we can work with a translation library or an API like Google Translate? Or with the new capabilities coming out in the marketplace around the AI, we're seeing a lot of advancements in that area. And I think there's potential for huge benefits for accessibility when we talk about automatically translating languages with the right context. And so if you want to let us know a little bit more, feel free to reach out to us to talk a little bit more about that. But right now, what I can say is each form is set with a specific language when you publish it. That makes a lot of sense. One solution that I am aware of for users who manage forms, the same form, say, in multiple languages, is they've taken advantage of our new workflow capabilities to build workflows that allow you to set different languages and redirect to specific forms based on the necessary language, while still having all of the responses collected in the same response report in one place. And you can still manage that from one place. So that's one of the benefit solutions that we've seen in use cases from customers who need to manage multiple languages with their workflows now.
And I love that. I've seen some very large workflows that, do span the globe, not just for languages, but people use that to break up different region-specific forms, collecting things from different regions. It's a pretty awesome global use case. Let's shift gears a little bit. We've got a couple of questions about autocomplete. This one from Maggie. Do you have any best practice suggestions for autocomplete? I usually turn it off because I have one particular user whose autocomplete will fill out all the fields with unrelated information. We love an edge case around here.
I agree. I've run into that before too. There's something about the data that gets saved in your personal browser, which I think is what normally happens is the browser will offer to save. All modern WebKit browsers support this feature as well, but I know it's meant to increase the usability and cut down the time to fill out forms. But if you store the wrong information in your personal settings within your browser, you can end up with a lot of funny information being set up. At Form Assembly, while we strongly recommend that you apply autocomplete attributes to your field, they're not required. And so, as a form builder, if you want to omit the autocomplete attributes from your form fields to maybe help prevent that from happening to your respondents, that's an option that you have, and that's a power that you have to control on your side as the form builder. However, what we would say is we would probably recommend that you do apply autocomplete attributes whenever possible to help make your forms more accessible, even though those autocomplete attributes themselves are not specifically covered under certain guidelines. We strongly recommend it because screen reader applications, as well as built-in accessibility applications like VoiceOver on Mac, do key in on those attributes when they see them in HTML, and they can help respondents better fill out forms when they encounter them. So I know it's a little bit of a seesaw, but you do have the control to turn those on and off and shift them a little bit using the form builder itself, and you have complete control over that capability.
On the same topic, Marianne asks if we're aware of where they can learn more about autocomplete fields. They're struggling specifically because some of the names aren't clear versus, given name versus family name. Any suggestions there? I'm not sure if we have documentation on that.
I believe we might be lacking documentation as well. And so I guess apologies on my part, Marianne. If you would be able to reach out to our team, we'd love to be able to send you some links. I will say semantically, there's the HTML specifications in which autocompletes are listed. It may not be the most consumable format, but we can work on something. I'll work with our knowledge team to maybe put up some documentation to help, translate some of the autocomplete attributes. I know they're not always the most readable on their own, but for our more technically minded users, if they're already familiar with those labels, it might be a little bit easier for them to do that and to set those up. But for those who aren't as familiar, I agree, some supporting documentation from us would be very helpful. So we'd love to be able to circle around with you on that one.
Yeah, I jumped into our help documentation. We do have an autocomplete article that does include some short definitions on some of those fields that even Marianne was struggling with. So I passed that along. For the rest of you, help.formassembly.com is our help documentation, and frankly, it's got some great stuff in there. If you have a question, it's a good first stop. But then, of course, we do recognize that we can't cover every topic. So if you have more requests, please reach out to our support team. We have time for a couple more questions. This one from Tiara. If I adjust settings in the mobile view, will they automatically apply to the desktop view? For example, adjusting font size.
Yes, they will. Our forms are responsive, and so any changes you apply, whether for the preview mode, will apply to both sides, and you should see your forms adjust to fit whatever the viewport is in which the forms are being served. So that's why you just need to build one form instead of multiple forms for different devices. So it's really handy, but I will say a word of caution in that the preview is not always the most accurate. We always recommend that, if you're able to test it on your own mobile device, you can get pretty close with approximations. And I think all modern web browsers offer some sort of web console or developer tools to help you also kind of play with that viewport size, and you can test it out for yourself within the browser. Just how I showed how Chrome's Lighthouse feature can test accessibility, that's a feature built into most modern web browsers, so you can kind of check that out yourself as well.
Absolutely. And one last question before we wrap up today. This from Lisa. Can I submit a request to Form Assembly Support to review our forms currently in use for an accessibility rating? I don't believe we offer that, but given the tools that Oscar showed today, I think you can find some very convenient ways to test that yourself. Oscar, am I mistaken?
Yeah, no, you're correct, Josh. Our team isn't necessarily set up to support accessibility audits, but I will say there is a very healthy market for accessibility auditing. There are a lot of tools and services like Form Assembly itself that are dedicated to web accessibility and doing reporting and auditing for you. So off the top of my head, I can think of services like SiteImprove. I can think of forums and communities that are community driven, like Accessibility, that are out there. And there are a